Welcome to the Golden Gems podcast. Today we're taking a deep dive into Aaron Swartz and the prosecutorial machine that targeted him.
Yeah, this is it's a heavy one, but really necessary. We're recording this in February of 2026.
Which marks 13 years, exactly, since Aaron Swartz took his own life.
Right. And, usually with these deep dives, you expect the story to have settled. But with this one, it feels like the dust has been kicked up more recently. It feels less like history and more like, well, a current event.
It does. It feels urgent. And that's because there's this ghost, really, standing right in the middle of our modern digital courtroom.
That's a perfect way to put it. The source material draws this incredibly sharp, almost painful contrast between then and now.
You're talking about the AI landscape, the class action lawsuits that are all over the news right now?
It's what the text calls the suffocating irony of the whole story. I mean, think about it. Right now, you have these massive AI companies, OpenAI, DeepMind, Meta facing these multi-billion-dollar lawsuits.
And the accusation is that they scraped everything, the entire open web, trillions of data points.
Trillions. Books, blogs, art, and yes, the exact same academic journals that Swartz was interested in. They took it all to build these proprietary models.
And what do we call them?
We call them pioneers, innovators. They get to ring the opening bell on Wall Street. But if you rewind to 2011, Aaron Swartz does something similar, but on a microscopic scale.
He downloaded 4.8 million articles from Jesus.
And he didn't get an IPO.
He was branded a felon.
And was facing 35 years in federal prison. So the whole thesis for today's deep dive is really testing that line. What's the difference between innovation and crime?
And the sources suggest it's not the act itself, it's who's doing it.
Exactly. If it's a corporation doing it for profit for an IPO, it's progress. But if it's an individual trying to share knowledge, well, that's a felony.
And it explains so much, like why his guerrilla open access manifesto is suddenly trending again on all these decentralized networks.
Precisely. And then you have the recent leaks about the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the CFAA.
The legal weapon they used against him.
It hasn't been disarmed. You could argue it's even more codified now and more dangerous for individuals than it ever was.
So to understand how a 26-year-old programmer ends up in the crosshairs of the federal government, we have to go back.
We have to look at the origin story.
Who was Aaron Swartz before he became a headline? There's a phrase in the notes that just jumped out at me. Violent intellectual acceleration.
It's a vivid way to put it. He was born November 8th, 1986. And that acceleration, it came from his environment. His father, Robert Swartz, founded a software company. So Aaron was around computing architecture before he could even, read chapter books.
I think there's a note that he was on a computer at age 3.
Yeah. And by 12, he's not just using them, he's building systems that grown adults couldn't get their heads around.
Which must have created this incredible friction with the real world, with school.
Oh, a massive friction.
Yeah.
He saw the public school system as a prison of redundancy. His words. He felt it was literally slowing down his brain, so he dropped out after his freshman year to just immerse himself in the internet.
And he wasn't just, playing games or lurking in chat rooms. At 13 years old, he wins the Ars Digita Prize.
Which is a pretty big award for non-commercial websites. And it brought him to MIT for the first time.
Wow. It's kind of eerie, him walking that campus as a celebrated 13-year-old having no idea what would happen there a decade later.
It is. And even then, he was building something called the Info Network, which was basically a crowdsourced encyclopedia.
A precursor to Wikipedia.
Years before Wikipedia really took off. He was also joining working groups for the semantic web, trying to teach computers how to understand context, not just keywords.
But the one achievement that just always floors me, and it's a technology that people still use the descendants of, is RSS.
RSS 1.0. The sources call it the Constitution of the Digital Age.
We should probably explain what that means for listeners who maybe only know algorithmic feeds, like TikTok.
Good point. So, today's internet is mostly a push system. An algorithm decides what you see and pushes it to your screen. RSS was a pull system.
You chose what you wanted to see.
Exactly. You subscribe directly to a blog or a news site. No algorithm, no corporate filter, just a direct pipe of information from creator to consumer. It was the plumbing of the early open web.
And Aaron Swartz co-authored the specification for this.
At 14 years old, he's on these mailing lists debating technical details with these seasoned engineers who just assume he's another colleague in his 30s.
And that leads to that amazing story about the in-person meetup.
Right. They finally organize a meeting, and he has to email them to ask if he can run his dad along as a chaperone because he's not old enough to travel by himself.
It just perfectly captures that duality. He's an intellectual peer to the architects of the internet, but legally, he's still a child.
He's writing the code for an internet that's a library, not a marketplace, all before he can even get a driver's license.
That library versus marketplace idea seems to be the central fight of his life, but he did try the marketplace route for a while.
He did. He went to Stanford, but that didn't last long.
Yeah.
And then he ended up in the very first batch of Y Combinator.
The Silicon Valley chapter begins. He pitches a project called Infogami.
Right, it's kind of wiki technology.
Right.
It wasn't really taken off, so Paul Graham at Y Combinator suggested he merge with another startup in the batch.
Right.
And here's a key technical detail that gets lost sometimes. Aaron Swartz rewrote Reddit's code base. It was originally in a language called Lisp. He migrated the whole thing to Python.
And why is that so important?
Scalability. Python allowed Reddit to grow into the monster it eventually became. Without that rewrite, it might have just died. And get this, the code from his original project, Infogami.
Yeah.
That became the foundation for the Internet Archive's open library.
No way. So if you check out a digital book today from the Internet Archive,
You are interacting with code Aaron Swartz wrote as a teenager. His fingerprints are literally embedded in the infrastructure of the open web.
so Reddit takes off, Condé Nast buys it in 2006. Aaron is 19 years old, and he's a millionaire. He won the lottery.
On paper, yeah. He achieved the Silicon Valley dream. Build, sell, cash out. But for him, it was a slow death of the soul. That's how the sources describe it.
He had to move to San Francisco and work in the Wired magazine offices.
And he hated it. The badges, the cubicles, the corporate hours. There are stories of him, crying in the bathroom or just lying under his desk.
It all came to a head with the Graybeard incident.
Yeah, it's such a strange and revealing story. He writes this fictional blog post about himself as an old man being fired, days before he was actually fired. It was like he was trying to manifest his own escape.
He officially resigned in January 2007.
And that's the pivot. The analysis in the text argues this is his radicalization point. He saw the dream, he got the money, and he felt completely hollow.
He realized he didn't want to build things to sell ads.
He wanted to fix the broken systems that control information.
So he uses his Reddit money to become a full-time activist. He starts watchdog.net. But the real bombshell comes in 2008.
The Guerrilla Open Access Manifesto. If you want to understand the rest of his life and his death, you have to read it.
He basically argues that locking up scientific research behind corporate paywalls is a moral crime.
He's not subtle about it. He writes, and I'm paraphrasing, we need to download scientific journals and upload them to file-sharing networks. He was calling for civil disobedience.
And he started doing it himself. In 2009, he goes after Pacer.
So Pacer is the government's online database for federal court documents.
These are public records, laws, rulings.
Right. Stuff that, in a democracy, you should be able to access freely. But they were charging 8 cents a page.
Which adds up really fast if you're a journalist or a researcher.
It's a paywall on justice, basically. So Swartz writes a script, goes to a library that had a free trial, and downloads about 20 million pages of documents.
And uploads them for free.
And the FBI investigated him for it. They staked out his house. But the thing is, he hadn't actually broken the law. He used a legitimate account. The FBI had to drop the case.
But that put him on their radar.
A big blinking red light. In their eyes, he was now officially a hacktivist.
And he kept pushing. We can't forget his role in fighting SOPA and PyPA in 2012.
The Stop Online Piracy Act. This was legislation that would have let the government censor huge parts of the internet. Swartz was a key strategist in defeating it. He helped organize that massive internet blackout.
The one where Wikipedia and Reddit went dark.
Yes. They generated 8 million phone calls to Congress in a single day. He proved he could mobilize the internet as a political weapon, and that made him very dangerous to people in power.
Which brings us to late 2010. He's a fellow at Harvard, but his focus is on MIT and a database called JSTOR.
Right, JSTOR, the digital library of academic journals. He wanted to liberate it, just like his manifesto called for. Now, the prosecution painted this as some sophisticated cyber heist.
But the reality was much more low-tech.
Incredibly so. He used an alias, Gary Host, which is kind of a nerdy joke. G-Host. Ghost.
He wrote a script called keepgrabbing.by.
But the physical act itself. He walked into the basement of a building at MIT, found an unlocked wiring closet, and plugged his laptop directly into the network switch.
And hid it under a cardboard box.
That was it. It wasn't Mission Impossible. It was a guy with a laptop in a closet.
MIT notices the huge data drain, though. They put a hidden camera in the closet.
And on January 4th, 2011, they film him swapping out the hard drives. He's wearing a bicycle helmet to try and hide his face. 2 days later, he's arrested by Cambridge police and the Secret Service.
The Secret Service. And this is where the prosecutorial machine really kicks into gear. The government's response was just wildly out of proportion.
It was led by U.S. Attorney Carmen Ortiz and Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Hyman, and they saw a career-making case. They charged him with 13 felony counts under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
The CFAA again.
It's this horribly vague law from the 80s, inspired by the movie War Games, of all things. It gives prosecutors this immense power. They called what he did theft of millions of dollars of property.
And they were threatening him with, what was it, 35 years?
35 years in prison and $1 million in fines for downloading academic articles.
Articles that he gave back.
That's the most infuriating part. JSTOR told the government they didn't want to press charges. They said, look, we got the data back, we're good. But the prosecutors didn't care. This is about making an example of him.
There was also a potential Fourth Amendment violation, right, with his laptop?
It seems so. The notes suggest the Secret Service had effective control of his laptop and were searching it days before they had a warrant. It suggests it wasn't about justice. It was just about winning, by any means necessary.
They offered him a plea deal.
They did. Plead guilty to 1 felony, serve 6 months in prison.
And he refused. Because being a felon would have destroyed everything he was working towards.
It would have been the end of his life's work. He couldn't travel. He couldn't continue his advocacy. He wanted to fix this system, not be branded a criminal by it for the rest of his life.
So they just kept squeezing him, draining his finances.
And then they crossed a line. They threatened to indict his partner. It was pure psychological torture.
And on January 11, 2013, the pressure was too much.
He hanged himself in his apartment in Brooklyn. He was 26 years old.
It's just... it is such an incredible waste. And you have to ask, did anything change? They proposed Aaron's Law to reform the CFAA.
And it died in committee in 2014. Corporate lobbying, primarily from Oracle, killed it. They like having the CFAA as a loaded gun. So the law that killed Aaron Swartz is still on the books, unchanged.
But his technical legacy, that survived.
It thrived. SecureDrop, the system for whistleblowers he was working on, is now used by more than 70 major news organizations. The New York Times, the Washington Post. It's the industry standard.
And his manifesto. The idea of open access?
Well, you have to talk about Alexandra Elbakian and Sci-Hub. She's his spiritual successor. She built a website that hosts, over 85 million academic papers, all available for free. She actually did what Aaron dreamed of doing.
Which brings this whole story crashing back to 2026, back to the AI companies.
This is the final brutal irony. The AI models that we all use every single day were trained on that exact same data. They scraped JSTOR, they scraped everything.
But there are no raids on OpenAI headquarters, no Secret Service agents arresting CEOs.
No. Those CEOs get invited to testify before Congress. They're hailed as visionaries. It proves Aaron's entire thesis was right. The law is a tool to protect capital.
If an individual accumulates knowledge to share it, that's a crime.
But if a corporation accumulates that same knowledge to build a proprietary product and make billions, that's just a competitive advantage.
It forces you to ask that fundamental question. What is the internet for? Is it a public library or is it a private mine?
That's the question Aaron's life poses to all of us.
Yeah.
And it's never been more relevant. If what he did was a crime worth 35 years in prison, then what do you call what the AI companies did?
A question without an easy answer. Are we citizens in this digital world, or are we just tenants on land owned by a handful of digital landlords?
And as long as we're still asking that, Aaron's ghost is still in that courtroom.
Thank you for listening to the Golden Gems podcast. We'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep listening, and keep celebrating the power of uncompromising voices.